Hello, all. Happy afternoon on a Friday. Welcome. I'm Jen Jordan. I lead content and thought leadership at Insight Partners, which includes the Scale Up AI conference coming up on November 12th. As a preamble to Scale Up AI, I'm excited to introduce this fireside discussion with LaunchDarkly CEO Dan Rogers and Insight Partners Managing Director Praveen Akkiraju. Our speakers today are pleased to offer you 35% off a virtual ticket for Scale Up AI, which features keynotes Andrew Ng and Ali Miller. The code on the website will appear below during the chat. And with that, please welcome our speakers to the stage. Take it away, Praveen.
Scale Up AI Soundbites, an engaging series of AI-centric LinkedIn Live sessions. We're featuring some prominent leaders from our portfolio. Particularly excited to have Dan here today. The goal really here is to kind of understand how leaders at the forefront of developing some of the core platforms in this sort of transition to these AI platforms are thinking about the future, and give us a sense of sort of how they are shaping their product strategy as well as what they're hearing from the market at large. So I'm thrilled to introduce Dan and kick this off.
Nice to see you, Praveen. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Great. So Dan, maybe you've had like an amazing career here at some of the most prominent companies. Both sort of helping shape the evolution of startups like Rubrik, but also scale companies like ServiceNow. So maybe we just start off with just sort of what was your path to this role as CEO of LaunchDarkly?
Well, sometimes I joke, I'm from the north of England, and when you're from the north of England, you've got to love clouds. So I figured I would continue that with my career. So I went to all of the great, cloud giants. So I spent time at Microsoft, and that's really where I got into my product chops. And then AWS, where I was fairly early there, Salesforce, and then to complete that set, ServiceNow as well. And then, I moved from the product domain into the marketing domain. I was able to bring all that together in my prior role as president of Rubrik, where we developed and launched the data security cloud and grew that business to become a successful public company. So I've been at LaunchDarkly as the CEO for about just over a year and a half now. And of course, I'm absolutely loving it.
Awesome. Well, that's a phenomenal career. How are you thinking about sort of LaunchDarkly is unique in many ways, right? In the developer world, you created a whole category around sort of managing the software production lifecycle. So how did LaunchDarkly go about achieving this? And how do you kind of think about category creation and this sort of really important phase of the software lifecycle, which is actually getting into production and in a resilient and reliable way?
In the summer, LaunchDarkly celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and the two founders, Edith and John, did an absolutely amazing job of creating this category, the category of feature management and feature flagging, and then taking the category to become mainstream. There's a thing called the Gartner, hype cycle. And what we find is that the category that we're in now has reached maturity. It's reached ubiquity. Every company needs feature management. But that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, Edith and John evangelized, really put the industry on their backs, made sure that we brought developers with us along on this journey, to the point that now, yes, 25% of the Fortune 500 trust LaunchDarkly. So we have created this category and then seen it through to maturity, which so many companies, this is called scale up. So many companies don't manage to achieve that level of scale. They have, don't get to that product market fit quickly. They're not able to go beyond the evangelism phase into the actual maturity phase. But this is where we sit today. And as a result, we're trusted by many of the leading brands around the world. We serve trillions of flags every day. Our flags are being evaluated by banks, by retail, by betting companies, by oil and gas companies, by government institutions in the core applications that they run every day. That level of trust has been earned inch by inch. We earned that trust by staying close to developers and software engineers. That's who we are. We're for developers, by developers. It's in our bones, and making sure that everything we do is a pristine choice for developers, but also in making sure our platform scales up as our users scale up. And so our platform needs to be super resilient, super responsive. And in fact, because of the global flag delivery network, we can turn features on and off in less than 200 milliseconds. Wow. It literally is the speed of a blink of an eye when we can change an experience if that experience is not working. So amazing. Yeah, that's a little bit about, going from 10 years ago to today.
Yeah, amazing. It just feels like yesterday where we had sort of a software outage essentially freeze the entire world of travel and cause like significant damage, both in terms of, economic as well as just in terms of, personal, the disruption to the economy as well. So the whole notion of risk management around software has become a key area of focus. So maybe let's dive into this a little bit. Why do companies, how do companies ship bad software? Nobody goes out and say like, hey, I'm going to send out a bad software patch, right? But how does that happen? And how is LaunchDarkly thinking about sort of helping your customers there?
Well, I'll paraphrase the question. It's why does bad ship happen? Maybe it's why does bad ship happen to good companies?
Yeah.
I would say, yes, you kind of mentioned the CrowdStrike example, but we also see examples of companies that push out applications where users just hate the experience. So sometimes it's really a performance issue. There's actual errors, there's actual latency. Sometimes it's just that we haven't thought through as an industry, our customer's going to love this. They're going to like it. They're going to adopt it. They're going to use it. So bad ship happens in both flavors. So why does it happen? Well, the first is really a solved problem that companies ought to progressively roll out their releases. They ought to release software to a subset of users before they release it to every user. There should be no company really in this world where software is eating the world, where we launch software or we release software to 100% of our users without understanding what happened when we did it to 1% of our users. So the first core concept, I think, for solving bad ship is progressive rollouts or targeted releases. And so this is the notion that you could predefine a set of customers that you wanted to use as a cohort to establish whether you're going to go to the next cohort, whether you're going to graduate and get to that next level. So I'd say if companies are still doing all or nothing releases, that needs to stop right now.
Right.
The second piece is around rollback. And so imagine that you do find yourself in a situation where, companies have pushed out software that is buggy or errant. You need the ability to roll back very quickly. How quickly? And I mentioned that 200 milliseconds a bit earlier, but I'll re-reference that stat. Well, literally in as quickly as a blink of an eye. So Fortune recently did a piece of analysis, and they said for a Fortune 1000 company, the average cost of downtime is $1 million an hour.
Wow.
You don't have an hour to roll back a bad experience. That's $1 million, cha-ching, cha-ching, literally every hour. You need to roll back instantly when things go wrong. So now,
not to mention the customer's experience, right? Which is much more long lasting than just the economic impact.
You're right. So so exactly. And also for the developers, is the experience, the impact is more long lasting too. The developers that were involved in that software that created these bad experiences, that's a taste that lives with them too. So that kind of, you don't want to have that, inability to control when things go wrong, because things are going to go wrong. This is the nature of moving fast. Things go wrong. But then you need the ability to de-risk that, to control the risk, control who gets the software first. There's been so much innovation in how we go from software from the laptop to the server. All we're asking as an industry is, can we get a bit more control now of going from that server to the customer? And that's where these concepts of release management, concepts of, progressively rolling out come into play.
Yeah.
The other pieces that come into like why bad ship happens, which is really around the experiential side, as you talk about, is you need the ability to experiment, and you need the ability to experiment with small cohorts of users to see, are they going to prefer this new experience? Hey, we've designed this new checkout process. We think customers are going to love it. Well, maybe we shouldn't test that on 100% of our customers. Maybe we should design a small cohort, compare it to another cohort. So again, why does bad ship happen? Because there isn't a culture of experimentation often in teams that are pushing out software. And then the final reason, which I'm sure I'll spend a lot of time on later, on why bad ship happens, is with AI, the volume, the throughput into the top of the pipe, which is more code, more applications, is increasing at breakneck speeds.
Yeah,
The
dramatic.
more code, more applications equals more potential for risk, unless you have this control process for how you're releasing software already in place.
Yeah, is this? I mean, we've talked about sort of this notion of guarded releases, right? And perhaps that's a good way to kind of encapsulate a lot of what you've been talking about.
Yeah, so this notion of a guarded release, this is really now how LaunchDarkly think about the world, is do not pass go until certain conditions have been met. And what are those conditions? Well, those conditions are A, have we got the right approvals internally? Does everyone know this release is actually going out? So has the software manager actually seen that this release is being pushed? And in fact, can we see that we're releasing something else from mobile at the same time? This other team is releasing this thing. We actually have coordination of our releases. So that's kind of the first notion of guarding the release. The second is, did we actually do it to a sub set of users rather than all users? Did we do it to a targeted audience? But then the third and most important piece is, did we actually measure and monitor in real time as we were rolling out that software as part of a progressive release, whether things got worse? Did we actually breach some thresholds for performance or breach some thresholds for latency?
Right.
And actually breach some thresholds, maybe even for conversion of the, what you were expecting to have happen. If we breach those thresholds, do not pass go. Do not move on to 5% of your audience or 10% of your audience or 100% of your audience. So this notion of a guarded release is every release should be a guarded release. And so our antidote to bad ship happening is guarded releases.
Yeah.
A simple question that we would ask of development teams is, are you guarding your releases? And then we would get to understand those concepts of release best practices.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I kind of grew up writing code and shipping product as well. And, way back when it used to be like, okay, if you're an engineer, you write your code, you release your code, and then you're off to the next feature, the next release that you're working on. And, now that software has become so ubiquitous and so like mission critical, just this concept of how you think about releasing software has to fundamentally change as you've been discussing. So LaunchDarkly feels like, because, again, as a developer, this is a lot you're talking about, right? In terms of like understanding these thresholds and benchmarks and who you're releasing it to and such like. So what maybe a quick overview of LaunchDarkly's platform, like how do you help make this all easy? I mean, you talked about the 200 millisecond ability to change things, but just like what are the aspects of the platform? This makes this easy. If I'm an engineering leader and I'm like, wow, I need to do this, but I can't get my developers to, build all of this themselves, build feature flags themselves. When we used to do that way back when, it's not, it doesn't make sense anymore at this scale. But how does LaunchDarkly go about that?
Well, there are 4 solutions in our platform. The first is de-risk releases. And this is the notion that in our mind, the blast radius of any error that you make in a software change should always be less than 1% of users. We can guarantee that happens because we won't let it pass go if some of those performance criteria are not met. So that first kind of core concept is de-risk your releases. The second concept is actually around developer productivity. We want developers releasing software. We want, you mentioned your early days and the joy of kind of pushing out software. That's what we want. We want that to have happen. We don't want to inhibit the velocity of releases. Right. And so actually our customers speed up their release cycles. They go from often releasing in years to months to weeks to hours to seconds. And so, for a company like LaunchDarkly ourselves, as an example, we release software hundreds of times a day.
Right.
And so we can increase the velocity of releases when you know that we've got your back. Because if things go wrong, we'll turn those features off. We can automatically remediate and heal bad software.
Right.
And so that kind of is the second concept, is really about productivity and experience of developers, helping you go fast. The third part of our platform is around experimentation.
Yeah.
This is the notion that, again, probably back when you were developing, if you wanted to develop a alternate variation of a feature, that would have been pretty hard to do. It would be pretty hard for you as an engineer to set up an A/B test. In fact, A/B testing may have been the purview of, some other team, maybe it was in a marketing organization. But now we want to give you those tools to say, I was working with my PM and together, product manager, and together we had a different idea of what this feature could look like. Why don't we just run that as a test, a very controlled test?
Yeah.
And only when we've got the results of that controlled test do we actually push that out to the full audience. So that's the third piece of our platform, is around experimentation. And the fourth and final piece of our platform is around a platform for AI applications.
Right.
And this is the notion that AI applications have a particularly unique risk to them. And it's that a lot of them are non-deterministic.
Right.
You don't quite know what you're going to get
Right.
until it starts to get volume through it, until it starts to have, its probability model really kick in. And so you sure as heck with any AI application need the ability to target that to a subset of users. You sure as heck need the ability to roll back if things are going wrong. You sure as heck need the ability to experiment very quickly on different prompts and different configurations and see which ones actually work in runtime. So that's the new LaunchDarkly. So really about controlling your releases, about taking the risk out of every single release and giving you that ability to experiment and manifest your AI applications in a low risk way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, thanks for that comprehensive view, right? It's almost like, it's like your best buddy, right? If you're a developer, just, in terms of de-risking, so you can go do what you are doing best, which is, writing code to create amazing experiences. And LaunchDarkly takes care of ensuring that you have sort of the safety net, if you will, as you're pushing this code out.
Yeah, I was going to say risk and innovation is like a handshake. It's like, you want to go fast. Well, in order to go fast, let us take control of the risks for you so you can just focus on going fast.
Right. How, when you think about sort of the market today, I mean, obviously you're a company that's at scale. You have, thousands of customers. What are some of the other approaches, if you will, that people are following? Is it primarily what do it yourself, like old school? I'm an engineer, I write this myself, or what does the competitive landscape look like for LaunchDarkly?
Yeah, I would say, well, the great news, as I was describing earlier, is this category has become ubiquitous. So where 10 years ago we were evangelizing of this concept of, hey, you need to decouple your deployment from your release, that evangelism worked. And I would say most modern software teams realize that the deployment of the software and the releasing of the software are two separate things. They're different concepts that you actually do have control over the release of software. And so most modern teams now understand that as a principle. And in the beginning, potentially they want to try and do it themselves. They want to potentially say, oh, well, we could, just create a simple version of this with some configuration. It's really like the early days of, Salesforce. People thought they could manage CRM by spreadsheet. Yeah. And, and then they kind of, Salesforce started to get more full featured. And at a certain point, someone says, is this spreadsheet thing scaling for us? It's really the same with kind of this homegrown or DIY approach to feature management. At a certain point, companies will realize, how long does it actually take us to roll back these features? Oh, we've never actually tried. Or, okay.
It's interesting. You just mentioned earlier that, with AI, we're probably going to 2x or 3x the amount of code that's going to be generated and pushed out. When you have that as a paradigm shift, right? I mean, that happens, I don't know if DIY is really going to cut it.
Yeah, I think it will start to show, break apart at the seams. I think you'll particularly see it in risk. And where it'll show up is, wait, we just pushed out all this bad software. I thought we had a homegrown feature flagging solution. How did that not catch it? Oh, well, we have different teams using it. We don't have the approvals. We don't have the, security and compliance around it. We don't have the ability to do guarded releases and do staging of these things. Oh, actually, we don't even have that notion of monitoring brought into the actual release process itself. Isn't it time? And so at a certain point, it's like, hopefully that doesn't require a major outage before, one realizes the immaturity of your homegrown solution. But yeah, I'd say, I think in just more broadly, there's always the question of, should one build software ourselves or should one, go for a, world-class solution? And that always comes down to economics, core focus, what you really want your engineering teams focused on. And I would of course argue that engineering teams should be focused on innovation. Engineering teams should be focused on differentiating against your core value proposition, and not on some of this tooling of problems that have already been solved in a high class way for a decade.
Right. We're almost out of time here. I do want to ask you, since you're one of the leading developer focused platforms out there. There's all this talk of AI sort of fundamentally changing the way software is done, not just in terms of amount of volume of software generated, but also in terms of how developers work. So what, as sort of a thought leader in the space, right? What do you guys see as the influence of AI on software?
Yeah, positive. First, let's talk about the increase of productivity. You can now automate repetitive tasks such as code generation, creating UIs, test documentation. So developers get to focus on much more complex tasks while generative AI handles the rest. Increasing quality. So we're actually seeing this huge pool of best practices brought into code fixes, detecting errors and problems in the application, handling, regression testing, etc. We see products themselves getting way better with AI capabilities now, using your own data actually to deliver better services. We see better customer experience too, faster response time, predicting what the customer wants next. So all this means great stuff for the core function of developers, which is pushing out high quality software, creating new experiences for customers.
Amazing.
But there is a but, and the but is, because more software than ever is being created at this breakneck speed, the principles of how you release software need to be in place. Otherwise, you're really just going to get this app explosion, app palooza, and risk explosion. And so you're actually going to multiply buggy code. You're going to multiply vulnerabilities. You're going to multiply that possibility of outage unless you have control over how you're releasing that software, who gets it, how you're making changes, how you're evaluating in a data-driven way the changes you make to your AI models under the hood. And so that's really where LaunchDarkly comes into the fray, helping you deliver those AI applications, take advantage of all that we've been talking about, but doing so in a way that you're controlling for risk.
Amazing. Well, that's a great way to end this chat. Thank you so much, Dan. That was a really amazing conversation. And I think on a topic that's of particular importance